first and foremost, you've heard us say this in every event thus far, and you're going to hear us say this for every event that is in the future, that we advocate that you consider donating to Nehemiah tonight. Samantha, AJ, and myself do not work for Nehemiah. We are volunteers, and Nehemiah did not tell us to say that, but we cannot expect them to take the time to plan these events, to, support us during the event, and obviously have Dr. G here as well, without expecting to give something back to the organization. And so we also encourage you to reach out to your company to see if they have a match for your donation to really maximize the impact of your dollar. If you are new to this series, welcome. But I would also say that you don't have to worry about taking notes if you don't want. We're actually going to send up a follow-up email. This event is being recorded, and we'll actually send you a link to the Justified Anger YouTube page where you can watch all of the previous events as well. And Don will be sharing things in the chat tonight, and all of those links that he is sharing will be sent out in the follow-up email as well. So just know that if you want to look something up, feel free, but know that you will get those resources. I will say too that we have turned off the chat functionality, and so as we're asking you to be interactive tonight, please enter your comments through the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we see them, and we'll actually summarize a couple of the questions that we have for you. And lastly, and then we're going to actually ask for a couple pieces of feedback from you, or a couple interactive things, is come up with questions for Dr. G tonight. This is truly an open forum, and it's pretty rare that you get this kind of interaction with a world leader where you can ask him a question and he'll answer it immediately. And I would say, don't take that for granted. Dr. G's time is extremely valuable. We're humbled to have him here tonight. And I would love that we can't get to many of our questions because you have so many coming in that we have to actually go to rapid response with Dr. G. So that is my challenge. Enter too many questions and we actually have to go to a minute or two response times. But the first thing that we wanted to do, and we haven't done this before, is at the end of every session, we have an Ally in Action challenge. We wanted to revisit that really quick. So at the end of the last event, it was to subscribe to the Black Like Me podcast, listen to season 7's kickoff, and any past episodes that you had time to listen to. And so my ask is, could you enter into the Q&A right now any impactful takeaways that you've had over the past month from the podcast, whether it's something that's been reiterated as a powerful learning or something that you learned that was entirely new? Take some time and enter that into the Q&A. I'm just curious what you've learned over the past month. And we'll just give it a minute for those to come through, and I'll read off a few that are coming in, and then we have another question for you before we introduce Dr. G. So AJ Dearlove, it's good to see you again. You pretty much attend every event, but joy. There is magic, not just hardship, in the joy and resilience in the creation of culture. I know that was a big focus of season 6 as well for the podcast. So thank you for mentioning that, because I think a lot of times we focus on the hardships, but there is a lot of resilience, excellence that we are trying to focus on in these sessions as well. As more continue to come in, I would ask a secondary question, which is a lot of times, I guess the most common question we've had in the series is, what should I do to get involved or to make a difference? And I will tell you, and I'll answer that question right away, and I'll save Dr. G from having to say it, but Dr. G, along with every other guest, has really come up with the same theme, which is take ownership to determine where to get involved. Where are you at? Where's your community, as Dr. Green spoke about 2 events ago? What resources do you have? What skill sets can you leverage? Think about those things creatively. And so we've challenged this group and various Ally in Actions to take those actions. And so I wanted to just stop and say, enter into the Q&A, because a lot of you have stepped up to that challenge. What have you done over the past 2 to 3 months to educate, donate, and affiliate? And then what we're going to do is actually summarize these as you're starting to enter those in. We'll summarize those and present them at the next event as an output so that you can see what other people are doing. So if you'd be willing to enter that into the Q&A as well, because I think the creativity that you have and what we've seen from people can actually inspire other audience members to do other things as well. And I'll give you just a minute to enter that in, and then we will introduce Dr. G. So we'll let you keep entering. There's not a lot coming in right now, but we want to make sure that we do capture a few of them. So Elizabeth, thank you for entering for educating. You've attended the info sessions on the Center for Black Excellence and Culture, which is awesome. For those who want to learn more about the center, I'd actually encourage you to listen to the last event where Dr. G and his sister Reverend Leleda G talked about the center and gave an overview of the importance of it. And we already have, so donated to the Center for Black Excellence, which is great. And now things are starting to really roll in. So this is great. Mary, you mentioned that you wrote to Dr. Ed Holmes over at your center about the horrific verbal assault that actually Leleda experienced in a call for action. And you got a friend to write a letter as well. So that is greatly appreciated. Missy, you attended the Black History for a New Day. Shannon, you share news stories related to the injustices of people of color with coworkers. Kudos to you for doing that. That takes a lot of courage to share that in a workplace where many are not wanting to maybe even hear the message. So thank you for being bold to speak up and share those things. And Liz, just one more. You donated to Justified Anger in 21. You're actually facilitating a community collection for Nehemiah. You attended the last session, checked in with leadership at your organization to donate to the center, and you're also participating in difficult conversations on Facebook. So these are constantly coming in. We're going to summarize this. This is exactly what we wanted to see, because I think this gives other people, again, ideas of what they could be doing outside of these events. So please keep those coming in. We want to hear from you. We want to create this collage, or we'll figure out the best way to visually review all of that. But for those who don't know, and I'd be shocked if any of you on this call don't know, but Dr. G, he is the president, the founder, and the visionary for the nonprofit Nehemiah. The vision is to engage the greater Madison community to empower African-American individuals, families, and communities to bring about hope, transformation, and justice. And so he has 35 years in this space, serving as an advisor to leaders across the world. So again, very humbled to have you here, Dr. G. Welcome. And I'm actually excited to flip the script and actually, I know you've been facilitating more of the events lately, so now we get to hear from you and ask you the questions. So welcome.
Dan, it's good to be here. And as always, I appreciate you, Samantha, AJ, historically the folks from Generator. This is fantastic space. And, my days are long. I feel like I'm wearing several hats. I'm leading a church. I'm leading a nonprofit, Nehemiah. I'm leading a podcast. And then I'm leading this team to build a center. So I'm actually running 4 organizations. And I don't think I've ever had this much fun in my life. It's exhausting as heck. I've got to take chunks of time off to take care of myself. But, being in the space and seeing you and Samantha and AJ and, of course, Eli and Don, it's just something I always look forward to, no matter how tired I am coming into it. When I log in and see you guys, I just feel real energized. So I just want you to know I have mad respect for you all and can't believe we've been doing this for the last few years. And I just look forward to it continuing. And I'm glad for everyone who's on the call tonight. This is going to be a good night.
So you basically just said that you have 4 full-time jobs. So just to put that out for the audience, and yet you have not missed a single Lean Into Allyship event, and so we want to thank you for that as well. Wanted to ask just kind of a broad question, Dr. G, to just kickstart things, and then we'll kind of go to a couple different directions, and again look to the audience, but. What's going on in the world currently or in the country currently that you're thinking about that's personally important to you, just so we can kind of get in your head a little bit of what are you thinking about a lot in past few weeks?
Sure. And Dan, when you're asking that, you mean good or bad is just catching my attention.
Yep, good or bad, just
Um,
kind of what's on your mind.
sure. I I continue to look at how divided the nation is um, along lines of things having to do with race. I think that's very interesting. Um, the whole the redistricting of voting lines is concerning to me. It used to be Dan and Samantha, people wore sheets, and so they sort of hid their identity when they did these atrocious things. Now people don't wear the sheets. Actually, I'm working on a poem or a Nehemiah video or a video for Jay's work, but something about they used to wear sheets, but now it's just so bold in what people are doing in Georgia and other places to really marginalize voters. I mean, supposedly this country is built upon democracy, and what makes us different is that we're not led by a monarchy and you can vote and have your representatives. Then we watch people just screwing around with, with our constitutional rights and in plain daylight, like right in plain sight. That's really concerning to me. That's just really that's difficult, and I'm sure other things will probably come up. The Senate hearings for the possible new Supreme Court justice. So in the midst of all the craziness that's happening, we do have an African American woman who could potentially be a history maker if affirmed. So there's a lot of things that are going on. For the most part, I try to find things, Dan, that give me some sense of hope and encouragement. But there's a lot of negative things that are going on that requires forums like this one for people to get to know more information, get involved, read up, vote, think differently, because there's a lot going on in our world. I'd say on a local level, there's some exciting things coming out of South Madison. The governor just announced a $5 million gift to our Center for Black Excellence a few weeks ago. But he also announced a $5 million gift to the Hub, which is being created by the Urban League and my friend Ruben Anthony, but also $4.8 million to Karen and the folks at Central Spano. And in my remarks at the press conference, I thanked the governor because I said oftentimes when you get into a geographical space like South Madison or space where Black and brown people are in leadership, historically business leaders will say, oh, we did brown already. We did Black already. We supported this person. We supported this organization. So you understand we have to spread it all around. But no one has to say that when they support 5 white organizations on the West Side or 3 white organizations on downtown. But for the governor to basically put $15 million into South Madison, and Ruben and Karen and I can walk to each other's offices in 5 minutes. Like we all just got out of our offices and walked. We could meet at the intersection of Park and Badger Road in probably 2 or 3 minutes. And so I'm also excited that that type of emphasis is taking place. People are going back and forth. Do we call it a renaissance? Is it a Madison Renaissance, a Black Renaissance? But what we do know is that Black and brown leadership are really rising up because I think what we have seen in the media, what we've experienced with COVID, the impact on our communities has just wreaked havoc. And communities would do so much to have the type of leadership that we have in Black and brown communities. And we have it here. So we can't downplay it. When you add in what Clean is working on and with One City, what Michael Johnson's working on with McKinsey Youth Employment Center or Youth Trade Center, these entities are probably raising somewhere near $100 million in this community, which is mind-boggling. It's just jaw-dropping because I can remember a day and time someone would say, well, we got $20,000. We got to figure out how to divide it up between these communities. So I'm pleased that the governor, the county executive, the mayor, local businesses and foundations are really thinking differently about how they invest in South Madison. So that's a bit long-winded, but I couldn't just focus on the negative things without saying the things that really give me something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. G, for that overview. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, everyone. It's
Hi,
great to be
Samantha.
here with you. I am glad to be popping in here for our next question. So we wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge a large topic that many of us are focused on right now, being the devastation that's happening in Ukraine. It's been clear that compared to other wars and grave injustice happening across the world, Americans are responding differently to the situation that's happening, right? And the acknowledgement that this is based largely on the fact that the majority of the people we're seeing, are white, and that refugees are largely receiving different treatment at the border. Although even still, we know that racism is persisting in these scenarios, in big ways. So we just wanted to make sure to kind of start out here with the conversation and just kind of an acknowledgement of your thoughts on those observations. Just spending some time here for a bit.
You know what, Samantha, I'm probably going to cheat you on this, but I just have to say I'm glad people are noticing. I think what I need to avoid is the opportunity for a sound clip of my somehow disparaging what's happening in Ukraine, because that nothing can be further from the truth. But when I think about the treatment of white refugees, European refugees, compared to those from the Caribbean, those from Mexico, those from Central America, those from the Caribbean, aid that's given out. When I think about how we are so appalled at injustices overseas, be it we incarcerate more Black men than any place else in the world, I just scratch my head sometimes, just think, where the hell are we? What gives us the right to be the moral authorities, fairness and rightness? And so I would just say, I'm appalled at what's happening. I hate injustice. I hate when people are being bullied and when they're treated poorly. But I'm glad you're asking the question that you do, because I don't want to have to sound negative against what our supporters overseas to state what we aren't doing at home. I don't, for Black and brown people, I don't want both of those phrases or discussions to really come out of the same mouth. But I would just say I'm watching. I'm noticing. I will say this, Samantha. During the height of the threat of the Cold War, America was trying to speak out against the atrocities of communism, was trying to come out against the USSR. They basically gave us the fingers, like, America, who the hell are you? You don't even treat your Black people right. You don't even let your Black people vote. We're watching on television. They can't even sit at lunch counters with white people. And that shocked America. America was like, oh, what? Oh, shit. People are watching this. They see what we're doing. We're throwing coffee on Black women. And so it actually did spark some action during the civil rights movement, but it's because America wanted to show we like Black people. We don't see color. No, you just misunderstood. Black people like the back door because it's closer to their homes. It's closer to the South Side. But our legitimacy has been threatened and questioned because of our treatment of folks at home. So I will say that in answering your question. I can't remember the name of the leader and I mentioned this on here before, who was the leader of the chamber in Birmingham and went to a World Business Conference in Japan. And during that day, the headlines was about either a bus that was attacked or something that happened against Black people. And basically the world leaders told that leader of the Chamber of Commerce, we don't want to do business with you. This is how you treat your own people, your own Americans. Your business is not wanted. And he was a big, is trying to really get more steel to come to really build up Birmingham. And so, for 50, 60, 70 years, the international community has just been telling America, shut up. How dare you tell us how to treat people? We see what you're doing. And so I will just state that not only you watching, others are watching, and I hope that they're noticing the difference in treatment.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you for giving that perspective, Dr. G, but also comparing back to our own country. I would quickly put another plug in. This is your time as the audience to ask whatever questions are on your mind to Dr. G. That doesn't happen very often. So just wonder, a lot of times what happens in these events is you'll enter them about 2/3 of the way through, and then we can only get to one or two of them. So we have more questions lined up, but the second questions come in, we're going to start asking your questions. Another question though that we had, Dr. G, lined up, and you actually mentioned this earlier, about COVID. So as COVID is, 2 years in almost, we actually had a session talking about the disproportionate impacts on the Black and brown community, how ventilators were an issue. And I feel like that hasn't necessarily been as much front and center discussion as it continues. And just wanted to ask you, as COVID continues, what are the less discussed impacts on the Black and brown community that we may not be thinking about, or we once focused on and have since forgotten, to bring it back to the forefront for the attendees?
Sure. The impact of COVID on Black people, I'll just speak about us specifically, were exacerbated because of pre-existing health issues. And a lot of those are stress-induced, diabetes, hypertension. We know that in the city of Madison, the city council, the common council, and the mayor have both stated that racism is a social determinant of health. There are a number of things that will determine whether or not you'll have poverty or your life expectancy. One of them is your zip code, but the other is your ethnicity and the extent to which you deal with racism. So as we develop herd immunity or what have you, and it begins to move away, and we begin to think about the next crisis, what's going on with Ukraine, the issues that made us prone to COVID return. Those issues aren't gone. And so, we've had response to this. We need to, we brought vaccinations to the community. We brought food and essentials to the community, toiletries to the community, which is very important. But none of those things get at the real cause and the real issue of the stress filled lives that Black people and people of color are living in. Folks, we're not just making that up. I mean, this data is coming out of the School of Medicine and schools of medicine and public health, that this bombardment with stress that people of color face in swimming upstream in a predominantly white environment creates stress. Today I took a meeting for my sister Leleda, because she's undergoing this interaction with the Overture Center because of how she was verbally assaulted. She called me up and told me about it and was very, very upset. I took her to go pick up her supplies, and actually she broke down crying in the space. She was asked to be a featured muralist, and she's having a visual response when she goes into it. And so I met with one of the leaders on the latest behalf, and it's just draining. I mean, you have these discussions, and people can be sorry about what's happened. I don't think one person is indicative of everything that happens in your organization. I wouldn't want one of my 4 organizations to be fully judged by the mistake of one individual. However, talking about it and explaining it and giving the sentiments and the ripple effect and people's responding, what can I do? What should I say? It brings a level of awareness of the racial issues, a level of heaviness that's not always present, because there are just days you just want to be American. You just want to be a Madisonian. You just want to be a nonprofit leader. You just want to be a podcast host. You don't want to sit down and just try to explain this, or to think, but what if they didn't have video footage? Would we be having this conversation? Or what if my 6'3" nephew was there while this woman jumped in my sister's face 3 times? He's raised well. This Leleda's son, he's not going to put his hands on a woman, but he could have possibly wedged his body between theirs. And like, what are you thinking? You don't talk to my mom like this. And just imagining what would have happened if she had said, "Oh, I feel threatened. I feel afraid. I'm going to call the police." Like, I think how we begin to play this forward and think, this is how it plays out. You say something and you say something, and you step up and I step to the side, and you step up again. And it drags you in. And I just know, since she told me, and the emails are like getting set to talk about it, I just have felt off. I just haven't felt like myself the last day or two, because many days I'm raising money in the community to build this Center for Black Excellence and Culture so that we can shelter from this space have a place to go and rebuild it, not have to process it, on our own, and not lose hope that this is a place where we can grow and develop. I mean, Laleda's had a pretty quick trajectory as an artist. I appreciate her art, I always have, but there are artists who have been on the scene for decades and are getting the kind of respect that she's getting. I mean, she basically just bought an iPad and said, I'm going to break out my inner artist. I knew she painted a lot as a kid or drew a lot as a kid. And so to be finding her voice as an artist and as a featured muralist, and ironically, the theme of the exhibit, well, anyway, I'm getting into too many details. But they wanted her to help open up these spaces to more Black people and more Black women. So the one step forward and the two steps backwards, there are days we shrug it off. There are days we just say, oh, they're just nuts out there. Then there are other days, it feels like you just sort of stepped on fly paper and you can't get it off your shoes. And it's just sort of, in your mind. And what makes people think that they can police me, and a Black woman let me in the building, so why would you step in front of her to do this? And so I realized that we have so much work to do, and it's so easy for people to either explain an action away, or to say they're not like the rest of us, that's why we fired them, or no one has any racist thoughts or feelings, rather than processing it and saying, all right, how do we not see this happen? And who's shocked that this has happened? Who's not shocked that this has happened? So then why were they still here? And who supervised them and promoted them? How did we get here? And how do we deconstruct the scenario so that we don't get here again? I'm not sure that people always want to do that kind of work. I just think they want to just get a quick, can you just allay my fears and concern? Let's fire this person, but we're all good. We're all good, right? Everybody's good. We'll go right back to business as usual. But it's not that easy, because it then unleashes other thoughts of other instances that you just sort of kept quiet on, because, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's not that. Most Black people don't get up in the mornings thinking that they want to find a racist behind every closet or a racist attitude. And so there are days you're prepped for it, and other days it just surprises you. And when it does, in an unexpected place where you as an artist find solace and you create welcoming spaces while telling your story, when it happens in those spaces, it's like being sick, but you don't have access to an emergency room. And so it's just unfortunate that in this day and time, we just have to still deal with these things.
In every way, yes. We are grateful that you took some time to share a little about what happened with Reverend Laleda earlier this week. We want to make sure that everyone has seen the resources that Don has shared along the side. There's a Madison 365 article that talks about the experience in a little bit more detail, and then some really excellent access points to her work, to her art and her podcast and her Patreon page. So if you are looking for somewhere to support tonight, that would absolutely be an incredible place to start. Reading that Madison 365 initially when it came out, and then just clicking on the link and the opener, addressing Laleda as beloved Madison artist. Laleda G could not be more true, and definitely from all of us in the Lean Into Allyship family, we just really adore and respect and are so grateful and appreciative for the light that she is and the gift that she is to Madison and beyond, and who she has been for all of us. So sending her so much love. I know that one of the comments that came in talked about, I think that a letter was written to the Overture. My family and I definitely called this past week as well after learning what had happened. I think that those are kind of those opportunities, right, and those experiences and moments where it is not difficult to step in, and make your support and just make your voice known for just plain and simple what is right and what is not. So I think that so much of the conversation is mobilizing, right? Such a big part of what you do, Dr. G, is mobilizing non-Black allies. And we get questions all the time about how do you start and when and where do you start? And experiences like this, moments like this are just kind of like that perfect entry point. If you're looking for a place, to make your voice heard and, use your allyship for good, this, is definitely one of those moments. So more information within the chat, just so you all have a chance. But
Samantha, can I throw one thing out? What's really interesting in this work is that if this were anyone else, I'd be like, I'd want to mobilize people and all of these things. But because it's a family member, I feel this pressure to, okay, let's not make this look like a hijacked moment. Like, let's not make it sound like the family's trying to get something. Or we're trying. So it's just interesting that even when a family member is injured, the mental calisthenics that I go through, unfortunately, to not make it seem or either not as bad as it is when it is bad and ugly, or we're not out for anything. It's just very, very interesting that you would just think it's just very straightforward. This is what they do. If this had happened to someone else, they would defend their rights. They would step up. And I still find myself having to say, I don't have to lay low just because this is my sister. But it's just very interesting that those of us who protect the rights of others hiccup a bit when it comes time to supporting the rights of our own family members. And that's sad. Yeah. No one's making us do that, but that's just a reality. And since tonight we're just really talking like about some of the behind scenes and part of this work is that we're committed to helping spaces become more welcoming for everyone. And so when you walk in and don't get that, it's an odd reality check. And I think that's just putting it, I can't exaggerate that enough. It's odd. And it makes you for a moment think, do I believe this? Do I believe that this can be? Do I believe that this can change? And do I just settle into being bitter, or do I just move and do something else? And I know that it doesn't represent everyone. And we have spaces and friends and cross-cultural relationships that have proven that that's not the case. But for just a moment, it just makes you question if what you've committed yourself to is really making a difference. But when you hear about people calling, writing letters, listening to her podcast, supporting her artwork, or being on this call, it certainly helps. But I think that there are folks who just want us to shake it off. It's like, okay, and I wish I could too, because I don't want to lose a day. I've got too much stuff to do in a day, but it's not so easily shakeable. So anyway, I want to get to more questions. I just wanted to say that just because people are taking our time to be here tonight, I just want them to understand that when it's personal, it's really personal, but I have to work even harder to give personal support the right kind of attention, because it's easy just sort of to downplay it so that no one misunderstands my family.
Yeah, I think it is so complex. We appreciate the authenticity and vulnerability that you're sharing behind that. And just know that we start sending all of our love and our support to her, and we'll always continue to do so. We hope everyone on the call is considering doing the same. We were hoping to maybe just lift it up a little bit and go back to an initial question that we got here in the Q&A from Elizabeth. And she would like to talk to you, Dr. G, about Black Like Me. She's curious how you choose your guests for the podcast, because she says they've all been fantastic, which is an absolute true statement. I think that's something that would be awesome to learn a little more about.
I think that's a wonderful question. Sometimes I'll stumble across an artist. Like there's a professor, gosh, we've got like almost 200 episodes. I'm trying to think now, almost 160 actually. I think her name is Carter. She's a professor. She's out in Boston. I read a piece that she wrote about the 1619 Project, about going back to about the 400 years of transatlantic slave trade. And just, I liked her boldness. I liked the fact that she was brilliant, that she was stating, I can't remember all the things she was talking about, but it was like challenging the US, challenging our view of history. And so I've got an incredible team. I call Don, Don the sleuth, because he could just go and find people. Again, that's like find them on social media and write them. And found out that her sister runs the Black Chamber here in Madison, that she actually has ties to Madison. So she was more than willing to come on to the show. Or there was a Black woman who She was in West Virginia, and she found that some of the police officers who had been helping hand out things to children were also part of the January 6th terrorist attack on the Capitol. So she called it out. People got mad that she was doing it. So she said, well, screw it. I'm going to run for state legislature. They called it something else. But they called it the House of Delegates or something. But Don reached out to her. We wrote a note. She wrote back and said, yeah. Or once I was watching, I love Triple D on the Food Network. I love the places he goes. And I try to find some of those places when I'm traveling. And I like Guy. And so he had a Black woman who owned a vegan soul food restaurant. And I just said, that's incredible. Vegan soul food, and it's good. And Black people are in there eating it. I emailed her on this. This is before Don started working for me. I emailed her. She wrote back like the next day. Yeah, I'd love to come on your show. So sometimes it's just an article that's written that just seems very intriguing, or someone will say, you should get to know this person. They've done some incredible things. Or sometimes something will happen nationally and I will want someone within my sphere of influence or reach to comment on it. And so that's how I do it. I've gotten into this pattern of doing episode 1 for each season is called a mic check. And it's, when you're having to give a speech or sing, it's just make sure the mics work well. So I like that solo piece because sometimes I just need to project what's going on. I also like rants that I might do inside because something will be so egregious. So, and what we've tried the last few years is to have a theme for each season. So we try to line up speakers for that theme. So this season, the theme is rising to the occasion. So when Black people are saying, we don't want to wait for every white person to wake up and say, we want to help, we got to keep moving it along. And then finding people that are doing really interesting things inside that space. And lastly, I might just come across some media that's so interesting to me that I just want to process it. Like, I can't give this away because this is going to drop, but soon. But I just did an interview with the young man who was a listener to the podcast. And I actually brought him on to co-host an episode for an inaugural episode called Brother to Brother. But we're listening to a YouTube video of Malcolm X's sister talking about being a surrogate mother to him and how her thoughts about him as a young boy. Phenomenal. You got to catch it. That one's dropping, I think, in a few weeks. And then the episode that's out right now is with Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, and just talk about his role and his leadership and everything. So I come at it from different ways, but when I zero in on a guest, I think this is a good one. So I don't really have people lined up for like the next season, but it seems like once I set what the season is, the pieces really falling together. But I love doing Black Like Me. I love it. And when I come on next month, I'll tell people that Madison Magazine has asked for nominations so that they can put people on their list to be voted upon as best in Madison. So Black Like Me actually made it to the podcast list, but voting doesn't start until April 1st. So when we come back, we might send something to the list of people. But I believe Don can verify, I believe it's April 1st to the 22nd. So for folks who are here, and I think you can only vote once on this one, but still, I would love for people to do it or repost it on their social media, because that would be cool to be seen as one of the top or hottest podcasts in my own city. I'd enjoy that.
Well, expect that as a future ally in action. I think that's a pretty easy one to throw in the next event. And
I saw you writing, Daniel. I saw
you. And there's no way, Dr. G, we can get a teaser of who you interviewed. We got to really wait.
You won't.
Or who you had on the podcast. I mean,
he's a listener, but it's the guy that we process. Malcolm's sister. We process what she says about what Black boys need while being raised, and it's just.
Got it. Just seeing if I can get a teaser out of you or not. So
yeah, I just need every teacher, every social worker, anyone who works with kids, who knows kids, to really listen and think about that. Because when you consider what she's saying and how the opposite has happened, it's not hard to understand why so many of our Black boys are in juvenile corrections, mental health facilities, and eventually prison or
Yep.
dead. It makes you understand because there's something so basic that we've been denied that we need. And she was so wise to provide it in the 30s. Like she was making statements about him in the 1930s. That's just profound. So keep listening, subscribe so you get an email every time we drop an episode.
Yep, for sure. And Mary actually asked a question that I don't know that we've really discussed much in the last 2 years in this series, which is just basically her question was, across the country, state legislators have introduced or passed chilling legislation targeted at LGBTQ people. And ultimately what she said, or their parents, and wanted for you to just speak on the intersectionality of race and gender identity. Because I think oftentimes, we think about race and then gender identity and everything's in its own silo. But can you speak to it about the intersectionality and the impacts that also has that people may not be aware of when they hear something like that in the news?
Well, I think it makes it, it's like double jeopardy. It's we look at people just through one lens and not realize that there's several threads running through them, and it makes it just even more complicated for folks, particularly people of color. And so I mean that could be a whole episode or a whole podcast discussion, but I just think people need to understand that individuals are complex, and when we just treat them one way and not see them through different lenses or from different levels, I just think it's not fair, and it's just very, very difficult. And I think we just have to understand that some people are just being double and triple punched. And okay, is it because of sexual identity? Is it because of orientation? Is it because of gender? Is it because of ethnicity? And then sometimes you just get it with two or three of them, and it just makes it really, really, really hard. And like, what do you unpack first, and what do you really work on? What do you really work on first? And so, yeah, it's just so much that could be said, in this, and really understanding it. I would also say that, yeah, I would just leave it. It's and when you hear about how people are being treated and mishandled, it's just heartbreaking. It's like we look for reasons to hate people and to dislike folks. It makes it really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. We can trying to pull up the open Q&A. Donna's faster than I am sometimes working through some of these. So Julia mentioned a comment which I know you talk about often, Dr. Jean. I think we touched on it a bit earlier, but just wanted to revisit. Julia says, the experience of racism is actually a risk factor for death, stress, trauma, cardiac disease, and endangers health. The narrative is that there are disparities. The actuality is that it is racism that leads to poor health outcomes. I know you talk about this often. It's something that we have learned so much from you, throughout the last couple of years of Lead Into Allyship. Is there anything additional that you wanted to share on that this evening?
No, except I think I'd just say that this is real. That I think people just feel folks are complaining. They're lazy. They just want things handed to them, and this is not the case. I mean, what we saw, what was it, Henry Louis Gates be pulled over by the police in front of his own house because people didn't think he belonged there, or the stress of the awareness that this is how you're perceived, the code switching that's required, or the mental aloofness to not let it hurt you, or being overwhelmed mentally because it is having an impact on you. It puts a whole lot in, and I don't know all the science between the epigenetics of this, but there's been some scientific proof among my biochemists that trauma that's experienced in individuals shows up in their children and grandchildren. That you can take a look at the DNA of folks who are Jewish, whose grandparents survived the Holocaust compared to those whose grandparents didn't have that experience. And there's stress factors that actually show up in their DNA. So this level of stress is real, and it passes from generation to generation. If you have an illness based on cancer, you might say what kind of cancer it is, but you don't have to explain the physiology behind cancer. You know, diabetes, you can just say you have it or you don't, but exactly what happens in the pancreas and the liver, like what happens in the bloodstream, like why do people lose toes and fingers and limbs and eyesight? Most diabetics can't explain it, except they just know they don't want that to happen. When you have an impact of race, people want you to always explain it. Well, how do you know it's race? And why do you know it's race? And wouldn't they have said that to anyone? Or they don't put change in anyone's hand. They put it on the counter for everyone, or whatever the situation may be. But it's something that has an impact on health that we're constantly asking people, explain it to us, then explain what we can do to make it not so. Or, well, what about people who come here for school from West Africa, from Nigeria? They succeed. What about my grandma? She came here, didn't speak English. And, she met a soldier and they got married and used the GI Bill and got a home. Like, what's wrong with your people? Even when I went to Africa for the 1619 year of return, it was really 2019, but it was commemorate the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade and our survival. And I was been interviewed by a Ghanaian TV host, 12 million viewers on this. Like, this thing is just huge. And she said about race in America, but aren't Black Americans bringing this upon themselves? I had to catch myself because I realized, wow, the propaganda has reached Africa. So you go to Africa and get folks and put them through these atrocious, I keep saying atrocious situations for centuries. And then you send propaganda back to the motherland because they're not doing as well as you are here with maybe some limited resources. And so to do the dirt that's been done, but then to cover it up and blame the victim. And so I had to nicely educate herself. But the fact that she felt comfortable saying that on national television in front of 12 million people, I'm glad she gave me enough time to help correct her about what has taken place and to say, well, we might not have experienced colonialism the way you did here, but let me explain what's happened to us in the last 400 years and what has taken place, and being stripped and beaten and raped emotionally, sexually, financially, spiritually. To kind of walk her through it is very helpful, but it's just yikes.
Yeah. No doubt. I think this leads into a bit of Julia's follow-up question that she had actually asked. I apologize, I didn't connect the two. She asked her question, made that comment, and then followed up with, how do we have conversations about the root causes, not just the symptoms? So, we can take that specific to, healthcare and health concerns, and maybe just even on the broader conversation, right? Which I think is so much of kind of what we're leading into.
Sure. So Samantha, the root cause of racism itself, I want to make sure I'm understanding.
I think her question was probably specific to the health concerns, right? And how do we talk about, it's not just a disparity, right? It is that kind of that direct cause. But in general, in the work that we're doing with Lean Into Allyship, right, and these conversations and the purpose that we have here, we want to, the importance of truly knowing the root cause, right? Not just the symptoms and the supports, but truly understanding the root of these issues.
Definitely. I would also say, just like we always mention to people about educate, donate, and affiliate, that you can certainly Google Black health disparities, because it does winnow down right to stress or food deserts in certain inner city areas where there aren't grocery stores, or there are fresh vegetables and there's not enough land to grow your own vegetables. So there are things that are real impediments to this. We can probably gear an episode around it, but in the meanwhile, people really can just read about it. And if you're on this call and you're part of the medical community, you're a health professional, EMT, nurse, phlebotomist, physician, surgeon, begin having these discussions, because they're very real. And not only does it impact illness, but it impacts other things. For example, I'm on the Black Leaders Brain Health Committee for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, just wanting to bridge the gap between Alzheimer's research and the Black community. There's a new wonder drug that's coming out for dementia, but they don't know if it will work on Black people because Black people weren't in the trial. So drugs are still being developed, and companies who can't find Black people or can't entice them. We have more Black people in the world than we ever have at any point in time in world history. We certainly have more Black Americans than at any other time in history. But yet people are developing medicines, and they're getting money, like billions of dollars from wherever, from big pharma to make this stuff happen. And we don't even know if it works on Black people. First of all, that blows our mind because we just thought a tablet is a tablet. It's not. The HPV vaccine that was given to women, I remember when it started, they had to pull it off the shelves because it was making Black women sick, because guess why? Black women weren't in the trials, and they didn't know that it had the potential of killing Black women. Well, how many Black women were taking their daughters in for these shots because the medical professionals were saying, we really need this. We need to protect young Black inner city urban kids. So then the mothers are listening to these people, they take them in, and then it gets pulled from the shelves. And that came from a white doctor who's in charge of overseeing the AstraZeneca trials. And you guys probably heard him talk about it because he was a Black like me guest. But that's frightening to me that NIH and other groups can actually okay research and okay funding for medicine, and we don't even know if it's going to be harmful to Black people. So if we don't understand these illnesses and understand the distrust in the health system, then we don't know how to entice Black people to become more involved, which means we're not in the trials. And so as these diseases get better, we don't know if they work for us. Black people are developing Alzheimer's at a much faster rate than our white counterparts. But yet we don't even know if the medicines that are like close to market or the closest to market will even work on us. That's frightening to me, because it makes me think, well, man, if these organizations knew Black people and hired Black people and work with Black people so that they could have Black volunteers and people involved in the studies, could we have been further along in an antidote or a cure? Maybe my mother wouldn't have dementia right now. Like, when my mind starts going down that road, I have to stop, because it becomes very personal and very painful.
Yeah.
Because if you can't find Black people today when we are in excess, then when are we going to find Black people to participate? So the lack of trust leads to lack of involvement, which leads to misdiagnosis, which leads to more lack of trust. It becomes very, very cyclical. So Julie, that's a great question. But I would say in the meanwhile, just Google some of the studies about the impact of the Black community and medical mistrust, malfeasance from the medical community, and what the long-term effect of this is. It's just sad to think that in this day and time, you can still develop medicines and can't assure the public that it will work for Black people. That's appalling. Someone should have shut that shit down.
Yeah. I'm guessing that Don might already be on it, but there is an incredible Black Like Me episode around this. I think it was last season. I can't think of the exact name of it or who the guest was.
I think it might have been 2 seasons ago, but I think Donald,
I
think he'll drop.
If we can share that one, that's a definite listen. It's so good, so interesting.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, of course, the hour comes too fast. So before we have Samantha and Siobhan come on, Dr. G, I want to ask you a similar question to what you asked Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes about showing up with hope. I was able to listen to that podcast today, and you asked him at the end, does he show up with more hope than his dad did? And I want to ask you, how do you show up with hope, despite everything we talked about? Despite everything that even just happened to your sister this week, how do you stay motivated? How do you show up with hope? How do you show up and pour into people like us? And then, and secondarily, what's your last kind of, words to the audience about how do we stay in the struggle? Because I think we've also talked about, we saw a lot of focus on racial injustice about mid 2020 because of the very visible police brutality and murders. We're seeing that die down significantly, at least in my circle. So what is your word, kind of final words to the audience about how they need to stay in this struggle, even when things aren't as, based on how the media is portraying them?
Right. Great question. Most days I show up with hope because I've seen the distance we've covered. I've got a personal faith that helps me, and hopelessness is too expensive. Because if I go hopeless, I'll go rogue. And when I get to that place, I don't think I'll be able to come back. And so I have to keep fighting that, even when it doesn't look like that. Dan and Samantha, hence the title for this season's podcast, Rising to the Occasion. That if others aren't going to open the doors, then I'm going to find a way to build my own. Or I'm going to find a way to tunnel through. But I just believe I'm smarter than the races, and I can connect with people that can help to dismantle this, to create better unity. And it may take more time, but I also have ability to bring more awareness to it. So I think the closer I get to feeling hopeless, it motivates me to realize the terrible costs to myself, to my community, so that the immense reality of all of this, like, smother out that light. I think that light is much brighter than it. So it might be more wind on that flame, but it doesn't mean I can't push back against it. So I think that's what helps me to do it. The way people are responding to the center, the vision of having a physical space where Black people can gather and know that it can strengthen and extend lives. I want to live to see that. I can't give up on that. Hundreds of Black people have spoken into that vision. And so I think that that's what pushes me. The other thing is, we have to remember that police brutality and killing unarmed Black men did not start with Darren Chauvin. It was just televised. Just recently, there was an off-duty police officer who was serving as a security guard who put his knee on the neck of a 12-year-old. This happened in the last 2 weeks. A 12-year-old, like, I even put it up on Twitter. I said, how in America in this day, what would make you think, if you can't handle a 12-year-old, you shouldn't be in the business? So I want to keep people reminded that just because it's not in the media doesn't mean that it's not happening. We don't always see homelessness in the media, but it's happening. We don't see sexism in the media, in the news being reported, but it's happening. Sexual assault is happening. So I think we just have to remember, we're trying to get over the pandemic. We're trying to get over these other things. We want to get the economy back. While people were glued to their television and computers, we gave them a peek into reality television of, keeping up with Black folks. And so keep in mind that what we're seeing and what we're experiencing is being somehow guided. And so we cannot breathe and take our foot off the gas, because it's still happening. It is still happening. And we have to stay connected. Or something more diabolical is happening, like attacking our voting rights, our voting systems. So we have to keep watching, because it's not going away. And I think my word of encouragement to folks is, when we do this next month, I want each of you to bring 2 people with you. Someone that owes you a favor. When this comes out, post it on your website or your social media, and invite people to come and be a part of just learning and hearing. Let them know we're not beating up on people, but there's very few places where you can go to get this level of transparency, candor, from folks in a community where you can see their work and participate. So I want to challenge each person, in addition to the other ally challenges that Dan and Samantha will bring up. I really want you to bring 2 to 3 of your friends to the next Lean Into Allyship, and let's broaden this community and broaden the conversation, because the opportunity to do that gives me hope. Dan, you're one person. Samantha, you're one person. AJ is one person. Don, Eli, these are folks who have heard the message, was touched by something, and committed themselves to being part of the solution. That gives me hope, because I think us doing this is more powerful than the obnoxious person who thought that they could take on my sister walking into the Overture Center. We've got a power of love and unity, and we believe in each other and believe that we can make the world better. Even when I'm feeling somewhat despondent, I believe that working together makes us in society better than just sheltering down at home and just thinking it's not worth it. At this point, I can work my way back into the light when I'm feeling darkness, but people taking on the responsibility to learn, to support the work, and to get connected somewhere, educate, donate, and affiliate is what gives me a lot of joy in this area.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think on behalf of the Lean Into Allyship team and everyone on the call, we are, here for not only the responsibility, but also the honor to come alongside you and be of service as you build those doors and tunnel through. So we hope that, like Dr. G said, next time we have, 3 times as many when you bring your friends here to continue to learn and unlearn, learn and grow next week. But for this week, we are really excited to welcome Siobhan back to talk with us about some awesome volunteer and engagement opportunities through Nehemiah.
Yes, hello. As you can see, take those 3 actions. They're the simplest thing, aside from bringing your friends back to this amazing event every month. Reach out. We're especially Nehemiah is constantly working to improve and develop our community in even the smallest of ways. As you can see, every year we honor the mothers that help uplift the community, and we need help with those kinds of things. We also are always working on direct service efforts so that we make sure that it's not just upon the city to bring in a Kroger into a food desert. We're there to provide that food in the meantime, or those home essentials in the meantime. So if you have any of that, any capacity to bring those things to your community through us, that is a great way to do it.
With that, Siobhan, I was going to say that Nehemiah's areas of focus, right, at the 5 at the bottom are, and hold me honest to this, but if people are interested, they can email volunteer@nehemiah.org, say they're interested in one of those areas, and we can provide more details to them as well, correct?
Absolutely. That volunteer survey will ask you what those areas you're interested in, because we're working hard absolutely in all of those areas, expanding some of those areas, especially education. We definitely need more help in that area, and we greatly appreciate any input, even if it's just a little bit of time.
Perfect. And I do want to stress, the reason that we talked about just taking 3 actions, and we're going to give you a few more before we wrap up tonight, but it's not to give you a prescriptive list. This is to take, you've heard from Dr. G, you've heard from Siobhan, you've heard throughout multiple events of things you can do. We're just asking you to take 3 actions, and then we're going to come back at the next event to hear what those things were, because this event is not the end. The power is what happens between these events. And I really wanted to stress that. And as Dr. Green said 2 events ago, just to reiterate, allyship is not a destination, or it's not about being woke. It's about the constant awakening. And so it's that constant action that you're taking to do that. So just wanted to highlight a couple more things. That said, so we did talk about Laleta tonight, but for those in Madison, you can actually volunteer at Bratfest coming up. It's at the end of May, so you can mark your calendars, but if you do volunteer there, you can actually select a charity of your choice to donate to for every hour of your time. So it's $8 for every hour of your time. And so we wanted to highlight 2 organizations very quickly of people who are near and dear to our hearts, and they've also been on previous LIA Lean Into Allyship events. So the one is Defending Black Girlhood with Reverend Laleta G. So again, that organization is focused on taking bold actions towards making the world safer for Black girls to live, learn, and be loved. And she has come on and actually talked about the mission of that organization in the past as well. And then the second one is Foster, which stands for Families Overcoming Struggles to Encourage Restoration. And this is through Jacqueline Hunt. And really, this is a wraparound case management program that really is aimed at, addressing the needs of families, single parenthood households, those who have been incarcerated, parents of those who have been incarcerated, or those who are at risk of being in the foster care system. So 2 incredible organizations that you can support if at the end of May you're going to already be volunteering at Bratfest. And then one thing that we didn't want to miss as well is on April 14th, Aaron Hicks. So he's been on Lean Into Allyship. You're starting to see the same names come back up over and over again. Aaron Hicks has been on twice, but he will actually be hosting Lunch and Learn called Reducing the Prison Population. So another incredible educational opportunity that we wanted to share. There will be a webinar and it will be on YouTube Live as well. So with that, we always wanted to mention, stay up to date on season 7 of Black Like Me. We will, again, I think there's 145, 146 episodes. So if you're just starting now, go back and listen to any or all of them that are of interest to you. And then lastly, the next event will be on April 19th. So more details and topic to come on that. But just wanted to, again, thank you tonight, Dr. G, for your time. Thank you for actually Justified Anger and Nehemiah for providing the technology and the back end support, and for the planning team that it took to bring this together again. So for those who are still here, watch for the follow-up email to come from Justified Anger. It will come with, again, the link to the video as well as the resources. And with that, any last words, Dr. G?
Please just keep showing up and keep leaning in. What will change things is more allies. Black folks are, and our dreams are under siege. But together we can work through this and we can build a brighter future. So don't become overwhelmed by all that's happening in the world. Let's lean into this together, learn and do your part, and we can keep making a dent in this and creating a better world.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Dr. G. And with that, thank you for spending the last hour with us, and we'll see you in April.